So, Joe, Undine, what did you think?
I really enjoyed this film. I found it to be a very strange and haunting movie, and it had the kind of the feel and texture of a dream, I thought, although it was very much rooted in realism. And I felt that from very early on with the film. And initially, it was hard to work out exactly what constituted that sense of realism. And I think it's partly the very naturalistic performances, and it's partly the classical piano score and the muted color palette. But whatever it is, that steady, calm realism made the more fantastical elements all the more surprising and strange. And I really liked the fact that, however peculiar the film was, it's never whimsical. And I think that combination of strangeness and realism is what gives it this real dreamlike quality, because I started to think that dreams, for the most part, mine at least, they're not generally whimsical in nature, and yet when they're depicted in films, there is often a sense of whimsy and silliness to them. And actually, that's not what dreams are like. There is a real straightforwardness and a logic to dreams that is peculiar and all its own. So I found the tone of the film really beguiling. It was unsure. I was unsure pretty much all the way through what the significance is of those models and the history lessons we get through her speeches. This stories about the GDR and the history of Berlin, but it felt very clear that there was some kind of significance there, and that's a clever thing to do in a film, I think, because to suggest to the audience that there is significance here, even if you can't quite pin it down, gives those repetitions a certain kind of weight. They exert a pressure on the film that is unresolved, but nonetheless very present. And so it kept me really engaged with the film and wreathed it with this sense of mystery that I found really compelling. And then the mysterious nature of the film becomes kind of miraculous. There are miraculous moments. The story starts to echo and loop. And it turns out that he called her while he was in a coma. And when she wades out into the water, he suddenly wakes up. And because of the realist nature of the film, these miraculous moments feel properly miraculous, really alarming and strange and shocking. And at that point, the film's technique is revealed. And what it does is, and this is a very clever thing to do, and it does it really, really well, it kind of weaves into the film enough echoes and repetitions, that cafe where certain people go to throughout the film, and these models, and the maps and stuff, that the film has enough repetitions within it that it feels perfectly logical, even though it isn't. And that's a really clever thing to do, because it gives the film a sense of inevitability. And so even though you could never second guess this film, you could never really work out where it's going to go, it nonetheless feels almost inevitable that it does. And I like the little touches, like her name carved into the bridge, and that's never explained. And the strange fish that he's visited by right at the beginning is never really explained. And the only criticism I have of it is that I don't like that she killed Johannes, because that was the only part of the film that felt to me whimsical and a bit silly. And although it served a purpose, or at least it performed that kind of technique, it closed a loop that was set up right at the beginning. She says, "I'm going to have to kill you now," and we forget about it. And then much later on in the film, she does kill him. So it is consistent with the film's technique, but it did, as I say, it felt whimsical to me. But there was a small criticism. It was the only moment of the film that I felt didn't work. And given how many imaginative leaps this film takes and how many strange and unusual things happen within it, it's quite extraordinary that there's only really one false step. I also really liked that, although it's a love story, both the main characters have previous and future loves. And that gives it a tenderness tempered with realism. And so the film is really strange and beautiful, but also in a way strangely mundane and everyday. So on the whole, I found it lovely and charming, and really original. It's quite a quiet film, and so its kind of miraculous nature really snuck up on me. but it really lingered. I finished it a few days ago, and I've been thinking about it a lot. And I thought the performance was really good, and particularly Christoph was just a really charming screen presence. I really liked his character, so I was really pleasantly surprised by the film.
Yeah, well, I really liked it too, although not without kind of some reservations, which weren't really satisfied by the end of the film. But I've watched it yesterday and I found myself thinking about it today, and I actually listened to the piece of music, the Bach music, and kind of relived some of the film while listening just to the music. And I'm kind of really appreciating it more today. You're definitely right in the sense that it feels like you know, the more time passes and the more the film is kind of dreamlike, isn't it? I guess like a dream. It's like, you know, it's feeling. I kind of like it more today than I did yesterday. I also watched the trailer today, so this was after I'd seen the film. So on Mubi, the trailer's there, and I just watched the trailer, and I just thought, wow, that looks like an amazing film. And in some ways, they really capture the film. The first kind of 25 seconds, 30 seconds of the trailer is just amazing. It really captures something of the two of them and the diver speaking and then the fish tank breaking, and it's spectacular. So, you know, I'm really more impressed with it today. And you say you saw it a few days ago. I think I will be thinking about this film. One issue I have with this film is that, you know, we kind of have an agreement that we don't look up anything on the film. And I just wondered, watching it for a little bit, what Undine meant, you know, so I just Googled Undine and I saw that it's a water nymph and there's a whole myth around it. And I didn't read it because we've agreed not to kind of research things, but I don't know what that myth is. And it feels like, in terms of understanding the film, you know, does it matter that I don't know what the myth is? I was thinking, would I have liked a definition of what an Undine is at the start of the film, like just, you know, maybe some words on the screen just giving the definition of it? Or does it not matter? You know, I've taken the film at face value, and, you know, but I kind of feel, in terms of understanding it, there's lots of things I don't understand about this film, like you. And I feel, in understanding it, that knowing the mythology that underlies it would be, you know, could be helpful. So I'm going to look that up once we finish the review. Some of the things that I really liked about this film were, I loved the opening scene, which just, you know, it's like it's the second after he's told her that he's leaving her, or he's not, you know, he's ending it. So for the first kind of 20-25 seconds of the film, we've just got her reaction to him ending the relationship. So it kind of is a strange point to start the film, but I found it very powerful and it really worked for me. And we're really introduced. I mean, I thought the acting in this film, that both of the main actors were really good. And, you know, so it's like I was drawn in by her acting right from the start. I thought the aquarium scene was just extraordinary because, as you say, this film is kind of, you know, a lot of it is underplayed, is mundane, it's all very normal, but that scene was just, I thought that was spectacular. It was like breathtaking and poetic. The way it was done, it was, I thought that scene was fantastic. And I kind of loved the magical realism of it, in the sense of, you know, like in Petite Maman, which we recently reviewed, you know, and you're not worrying. I think magical realism really works when you don't worry whether what's happening is real or not. And I found in this film, exactly that was happening. As you say, it's all quite mundane, but then these fantasy magical things start happening, and and it's perfectly normal, you know. And I really liked it when the diver speaks to her, you know, that I think that's the first time you think, well, what's going on there. And the other thing I really liked about this film, and you mentioned a lot about the repetition, but you didn't mention the music, because of course the music keeps repeating. It's the same piece of music. And it really reminded me of, I think I mentioned it in a film we reviewed a couple of months ago, with Bresson's A Man Escaped, where it has a Mozart piece of music, which it just keeps playing every 5 or 10 minutes. It just restarts this piece, exactly the same piece of music. And in this film, it was exactly the same piece of music, kept restarting. I really like that in a device, as a device in a film. And I think you're right with all the other repetition that it had of these things happening, like the architecture lectures, and it just really worked. It's such an interesting package. I mean, I felt a little bit where I felt a little bit dissatisfied at the end was I could see no link between the architecture lectures, tours, whatever they were, and the love story. And in fact, it's interesting, when you watch the trailer, there's no architecture in it at all. It's all about the love story. But it seems that the architecture, as you said, it feels like it has a great significance. I really enjoyed these scenes. You know, they were factual, they were serious, but I really enjoyed them. And you know, the little details in them, like the explanation of how, you know, some of the models were unfinished, you know, which denoted something for a building. But then on the communist model, there were the detail of how ornate some of the balconies were, and the, you know, it's like it feels like this has a great significance without really understanding what it is. You know, when she tells the story about a fake front of a building, a fake front of an old building being put in a place so that people could see whether they liked it or not. And then she talks about architecture theory and form follows function. And I mean, I just found all that fascinating. I rewound it a couple of times just to listen to it again and try and understand it. And I guess I was confused because I just don't see what the tie is to the rest of the film. But maybe that's okay, because, you know, as you said, it doesn't feel like it's ridiculous. It doesn't feel like it feels like it is tied to it, but I can't actually understand it. And maybe that's, you know, maybe that's what exactly it sets out to do. I was uncomfortable about the murder, and I was also really uncomfortable about the ending, that, you know, Christoph is happy with with his new partner, and she's pregnant, and then it's like Undine is, you know, coming between them and kind of going to spoil his happiness. But in fact, somehow it all comes together. I mean, it's a fantasy, it's a fairy tale. It's, you know, clearly Undine isn't like a fairy princess. There's a dark side to her as well. And yeah, she's interesting. She's kind of very needy and childlike, but lethal. And so it's all fascinating, but I just, you know, I don't really understand what her purpose was. And so it kind of left me feeling that there was something of a problem that, you know, so it wasn't quite resolved for me at the end of the film. But as I said at the start, I think that today I'm not feeling that so much. And it was a really powerful experience listening to that piece of music and just feeling like the pieces of the film do fit together, even though I can't quite see the whole picture. So yeah, like you, I really, really enjoyed it. Really unique little film, this, I think.
Yeah, agreed. There was one bit where either the model or the map superimposes over Christoph and Undine as they're walking somewhere, very briefly, like flashes over them. And as you were talking there, I started to wonder if perhaps perhaps the link is that, you know, maps and history and topography and the human psyche and your own personal history, and, you know, perhaps that's the overlap, which is kind of tenuous, but nonetheless has a strange kind of logic, that they're both about uncovering things, finding things, getting lost, you know, turning back round again. And, you know, there is, you know, the film kind of navigates something, doesn't it? You know, that's a bit tenuous, I know, but that's all I can think of, really. But it's interesting that I think that's a remarkable quality, isn't it? That a film can throw up inconsistencies that in the moment feel a bit dissatisfying, but ultimately they, you know, they kind of reconcile themselves over time. And I think that's a lovely way to put it. That successful magical realism is where you don't worry if things are real or not. Yeah, I think that's a really great way of summarizing that feeling, because magical realism is one of those styles or techniques or whatever that on paper I just can't stand it, but actually really successful examples of it, you don't really notice it, right? Yeah, I don't think of it as magical realism. Yeah,
I that's funny, because I hesitate to use the word magical realism in terms of a film that I would like, because there's something in me, and maybe it's a little bit of ignorance about what magical realism is, that thinks, oh, oh, that's not for me, you know, it's a bit but actually, you know, I think that if I've got the definition of magical realism, like Petite Maman and this film would be considered magical realism, and I really like both of those films, and they both have I mean, I think Petite Maman is a more perfect film than this, but they both have similar qualities in the sense of that they're quite mundane and ordinary and nothing dramatic happening, but then you just have these moments of magic, which, you know, totally are believable and not out of keeping. And as you say, the realism and the strangeness totally coexisting without being problematic. I mean, I missed that superimposition of the map on them. If you say it was brief, maybe I just looked down or looked away or was looking at the subtitles. I actually missed that. So that actually is potentially quite significant, because that's an actual link between them, isn't it? So maybe I need to go back and find that, actually. But it feels like the explanation you came up with is a kind of obvious one, I guess, having seen that. But it feels like the architecture is about so much more, and some of those points, that there have to be political points being made there, you know, about some of the buildings, and I'd just like to know more. But, you know, maybe that's the genius of the film, that it's, you know, even if you knew all of the history and you knew the mythology, that still it's full of mystery, this film. And so, yeah, I mean, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, very enjoyable film.
Yeah. So what are we doing next?
Next up, we're watching Air Conditioner by Frederick.
Looking forward to it.